Welcome to our Mary Greeley Primetime Alive presentation, The Basics of Heart Health. I'm Vicki Newell, and I manage the Primetime Alive program for Mary Greeley Medical Center. As a reminder, if you want to sign up for a program or join Primetime Alive or watch a past recording of a program, you can go to our website, mgmc.org/PTA. So one other reminder before we get started. You have two packets today. The packet with the colorful, they're in the presentation as we're going along. So you'll kind of go back and you'll start with the other handout, but then really you jump to this packet. And the reason we did that, if we would have printed these in that packet, it would have been so small you wouldn't be able to read it. This way you have full-size copies and you can make notes on there. So those of you at home as well, you have two separate packets. Our presenter today is Jane Esterly-Rettig. Jane has been a nurse for over 25 years. She obtained her Master's of Science in Nursing from the University of Iowa and bachelor's degrees in psychology and nursing from the University of Rochester. When not working at Mary Greeley Story County Public Health, she serves as an adjunct faculty for DMAC Nursing. Jane's passion is health equity, ensuring all individuals have the opportunity to obtain their highest level of health. Please welcome Jane.
Thank you, Vicki. So welcome. So I am Jane, like she said, and what I'm going to do today is really a high-level overview of all of the basics of heart health, because it can get really complicated, but we're going to keep it pretty basic today. Most importantly, I hope that you all leave here today with some inspiration to increase your own heart healthy habits. So we are going to dig in. So the things that we do in our daily lives do impact the health of our hearts. So number one, we can control the food that we eat, what we put into our bodies. That has a huge impact on our heart health. You can control how much you move your body, how much you use your muscles. You can control if you smoke or even vape. If you do, I'm just going to say up front, stop. But Lyon, Iowa is a wonderful resource if you are looking to quit smoking. You also can somewhat control if you expose yourself to secondhand smoke. That's also a risk factor, is being around secondhand smoke. So avoid that as much as you can. We're going to talk today about how we manage our stress. So in our modern world, it seems like we all experience some amount of stress. It's kind of a universal experience. However, we can control a bit how we react to it and how we manage our stress. We can also impact the amount and the quality of how we sleep. So these factors are all what you might hear as modifiable risk factors for heart health. There are some things that we cannot control. So you'll hear physicians and the medical world describe these as non-modifiable risk factors. So our family history, our age, our gender, and our race can contribute to high cholesterol and diabetes. So the first modifiable risk factor that we're going to talk about is what food we put into our bodies. So the food we use to fuel our body does impact our heart health. So an easy first step is to add more color to your eating habits. So you can see that beautiful rainbow of foods. Fruits and vegetables have vitamins, minerals, fiber, and probiotics. We have all heard, eat more fruits and vegetables. So the guideline that you'll hear a lot is strive for 5 each and every day. In general, the more colorful the fruit, the more phytonutrients it contains. So really try to eat all the colors of the rainbow. So let's take a look at handout number 1 that discusses some of the reasons to add color. So all of your handouts have a number at the very top. So this talks about 5 different reasons to add color. So under number 1, it talks about how fruits and vegetables have nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Number 2, it talks about how fruits and vegetables are typically free of trans fats, saturated fats, and sodium. And then number 3, when it talks about first-class fuel, it's referring to how fruits and vegetables are high in fiber and also high in water content. Number 4, they're very versatile. So you can eat fruits and vegetables fresh, frozen, canned, dried. All of those different formats can be part of a healthy diet. And then number 5, fruits and vegetables can help lower your risk of many serious and chronic health conditions, so not just our heart health. So another important aspect of eating well for your heart is prioritizing whole grains. And the reason for that is the fiber helps to regulate blood sugar and may also reduce cholesterol. So in the United States, most of us eat way too much salt. So sodium can impact our blood pressure and impact our heart. So when you eat sodium, it makes you retain water, and that increases the pressure in your vessels. So let's take a look at handout number 2 regarding sodium. So some things to point out on this, you'll see 9 out of 10 Americans consume too much sodium. So in general, 70% of that high sodium impact is coming from processed foods and restaurant foods. So frozen food, processed food, in restaurants, that is where 70% of people in the United States, that high sodium is coming from. About 11% is added while cooking or eating. So you can see the recommendations there. So just remember that in general, if you are buying processed food, frozen foods, prepackaged food, make sure to be a label reader and look for the sodium content. So eating food is the best way to get your vitamins, minerals, fiber, and probiotics. For example, the oils in fatty fish are good for your heart. They're also good for your brain. However, taking supplements of fish oil can have some adverse impacts. So it's better to eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times each week. Overall, our bodies really absorb vitamins and minerals the best from whole foods. However, if your healthcare provider has recommended that you take a vitamin or mineral supplement, continue taking it. There might be a problem with absorption or digestion that make that supplementation necessary. So the next thing we're going to talk about is moving our bodies. So our heart is mostly muscle, and we need to exercise that muscle. Moving our bodies is important and vital to heart health. So we really need to retain the strength of our heart. But how do we do this, and how much do we need to do it? So let's take a look first at handout number 3. So this tells you pretty specifically that fit in 150 plus. So the goal is to get at least 150 minutes per week, and that can be broken up into whatever time increments that you want, of moderate intensity aerobic activity. So when they talk about moderate intensity, they mean you can feel that your heart rate is starting to increase. It might be more difficult to say a full sentence. So if you're walking or kind of jogging, you can still say a sentence, but you might need to catch your breath a little bit. And then if you're short on time, You can do just 75 if it's vigorous. So vigorous aerobic activity means your heart is really going, and it's probably quite difficult to say that full sentence. So just moving more and sitting less throughout the day can be very beneficial. Any activity is better than none. So think about in your waking hours, try to stand up and move around at least once every hour. So I'm going to make sure I'm done before an hour so y'all get up and move. And then this talks about adding intensity. You want to work your way up. So small changes. I don't want you to leave here today and say, well, I'm going to get 150 minutes of aerobic exercise and then end up getting hurt. So you want to make small changes, gradually increasing the amount of time that you are doing some aerobic activity. Add muscle. We're going to skip that for this time because we're going to get to that on the next handout. And then the benefit of physical activity is feeling better. So it really is one of the best ways to keep your body and brain healthy. It relieves stress, improves mood, gives you energy, helps you sleep, and can lower your risk of chronic disease, including dementia and depression, in addition to keeping your heart healthy. So then let's take a look at handout number 4. So this is often skipped by individuals, especially as we age, but some strength training is really important. If you're a woman, you might have been told by a physician that you need to do some weight bearing training because you want to maintain the strength of your bones and calcium, but it's also really important for our overall health and our heart health. So the American Heart Association does recommend moderate to high intensity muscle strengthening activity at least twice a week. And so then it goes on to talk about the benefits. And then I do like what they have to say about it's not about bulging your biceps. Your goal is to maintain or to remain strong and healthy, not bodybuilding at Venice Beach. So you can do strength training really easily just at home. You can do push-ups on the wall. If you have some cans of beans, you can just use those cans to do some muscle strengthening. You can do things as simple as some squats in your own home, but it's really about trying to keep those muscles engaged. Sleep. So raise of hands. How many people knew that sleep was an important factor for heart health? Oh, you guys are awesome. Vicki, you've been doing a good job.
Yes.
Excellent. So we're going to take a look at handout number 5. And you'll see on there, 1 in 3 adults do not get enough sleep. So how much sleep is really needed for optimal health? 7 to 9 hours. So how are y'all doing? 7 to 9 hours? Thumbs up. Okay. Some of you might be some thumbs down. You don't have to show me. But there are many benefits of good sleep. And then in this red box on this handout, you can see that poor sleep may put you and your health at higher risk for all of the things listed there. So it is really important that we do what we can to get good sleep. So what you do during the day does impact your night of sleep. So you want the correct quantity of sleep, but you also want to make sure that you're getting high quality sleep. So caffeine intake, light exposure, your routine during the day, your routine in the evening, and other factors can all impact your quality of sleep. Alcohol might make us think, oh, that glass of wine just made me nice and sleepy, but it does impact the quality of sleep pretty significantly. So let's review some sleep hygiene tips on handout 6. She looks very comfy here. So this is really talking about devices. So more and more in our modern world, we all have electronic phones or iPads or tablets. So this talks about, ideally, you're going to charge it in a completely different room when you go to sleep. So move it is that first one. So this next one, dim it. So most devices do have what's called either night shift or quality sleep. I've heard different names for it, but you can actually adjust how much light is coming off the device at a certain time each and every day. So you would just need to figure out how to do it once, and then it would happen every night or evening, because that has been shown to impact our sleep. So set it. Alarms aren't just waking up. Set a bedtime alarm to remind you that it's time to wrap it up for the night. So sleep experts do recommend that you go to sleep at the same time and you wake up at the same time. Sleep experts really are big on sticking to a schedule. And it has been shown through research to improve the quality of our sleep. And then lock it. If you've got a scrolling habit, okay, I hear some laughter. Some of you do. Try an app blocking app that makes it impossible to get lost in after-hour emails, social media, or gaming. And then simply blocking it. So turning off your ringer, turning off your notifications for emails or text messages during night. All of those things can help. So if you do want to dig deeper into the topic of sleep, I do recommend the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's a very informative book. So stress. So our body's reaction to stress is simply a physiological response. So our body's response to stress is not negative or positive. It's really just energy responding to an event. Our minds, however, it passes judgment on our stress. Our minds interpret stress as negative or positive. So an example of this is I had an acquaintance who jumped out of planes for fun. So she perceived this as a positive stress. My mind would definitely perceive that as a negative, if not life-threatening stressor. So in everyday life, we often perceive things that happen as negative stressors. Too many red lights, too many emails to respond to, too many requests to volunteer, just too much. And we get wrapped up in our minds that it's a negative stress. Meanwhile, our bodies are just responding by expending some energy. It's neither negative or positive. So the next time you feel yourself perceiving events as a negative stressor, I want you to appreciate the pause. So Viktor Frankl, some of you might be familiar with, he was an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor. So he described the following. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So, the next time you start to feel that stress creeping up in a negative light, take a pause and help your mind to perceive the stress in just an energy expenditure. So a demand or a challenge arises, you're simply expending energy to meet that need. And we're going to take a look at handout number 7. And this has some stress busters that can assist us to regulate our nervous system. So it talks about on the bottom, getting out of the house, taking a walk in nature. And then as you're doing that, taking in the sights, the sounds, really using all of your senses. Is the wind blowing? Do I hear birds chirping? Probably not today. What do I smell? Just really taking in all of nature. The next one, using your network. Reach out and connect with family and friends. I was quite happy to see as everyone came in today, there was lots of talking and laughter, and that is actually good for your nervous system and your heart. A furry friend. So for those of you that have pets, spending some time with your pet can lower your stress. And then again, we talk about sleep. Sleep tight. So they talk about setting that regular bedtime and waking up at the same time. And then putting your mind to it. So exploring mindfulness, a type of meditation, and then also exercise. So you'll see a lot of these things keep circling back. You'll hear them over and over again. And then we're going to take a look at handout number 8. And this has some benefits of breathing. So positive responses from your body. So taking slow, deep breaths can prompt several positive responses within your body. Helps to manage stress, even pain, reduces feelings of anxiety and depression, stabilizes or lowers blood pressure, sends more oxygen to your body's organs, and promotes calm by impacting your nervous system. And then one more handout about stress, number 9. And this has some tips to reduce stress fast. So we won't go through this, but if you find yourself feeling negative stress, I encourage you to try some of the things on this handout. So some key screening tests for monitoring cardiovascular health. So the American Heart Association recommends key screening tests to monitor and know the status of overall cardiac health. So the first one is blood pressure. We're probably all pretty familiar with that. So you should have this done at each regular healthcare visit or at least once a year if your blood pressure is more than. So they wrote the wrong word in there. So cholesterol, and there's more and more of a focus on LDL cholesterol. So when we talk about LDL and HDL, LDL is the low density. The HDL is what we can think of as happy. So you want that HDL to be happy and high. You want the LDL to be lower. So total cholesterol, most physicians, cardiologists are going to recommend it be at least below 200. Closer to 150 would really be the target. And then LDL, again, at least under 100, but there's more and more guidelines coming out that if you have any other risk factors, depending on what those risk factors might be, it needs to be under 70 or even lower. And then HDL is kind of the opposite. You want that to be at least 50, if not higher. So cholesterol should be looked at every 4 to 6 years if you are a normal risk adult. A lot of us in the United States are not normal risk adults, so we have our cholesterol taken yearly. So our weight and our body mass index, your physician's going to take a look at that during a regular healthcare visit. Your weight circumference is sometimes used as needed to help evaluate cardiovascular risk. And then a blood glucose test at least every 3 years. And you'll see there's a little star there. So if it's been elevated at all, if you have family history of diabetes, if you've had some high blood glucose in the past, they're going to check it more often. And then discuss smoking, physical activity, and diet at each regular healthcare visit. So another screening tool that's used by some cardiologists is an inflammation biomarker called C-reactive protein. So talk with your provider if you're interested in learning more about that. And what's listed here is really just the basics for heart health. And then handout number 10 lists all these and it gives some more information, a little bit more in depth. So further tests beyond these basic tests, if this was indicating that you did have some high cardiovascular risk, it might involve a physical exam, electrocardiography, echocardiography with an ultrasound, stress tests, coronary artery calcium scoring, CT angiography, and also genetic testing. So we're going to talk more in depth about blood pressure. So again, blood pressure measurement should be done at a minimum annually. The goal pressure, as recommended by the American Heart Association, is a systolic blood pressure under 120 and a diastolic under 80. So anything higher than either 120 or 80 is considered elevated. And then once you've reached 130 for systolic or higher than 80 for diastolic, that is technically stage 1 hypertension. And so the American Heart Association bases this on research looking at damage that can happen to vessels with those higher blood pressures. So did you know that the way your blood pressure is taken can significantly impact the reading? We are going to take a look at this number 11 handout. So it's purple up here and you have it in red. So these are 7 things that often happen either at home, if you have a home blood pressure cuff, or especially in a physician's office when you have a blood pressure taken. So my advice to you is really be an advocate for your own health, especially if you are on any sort of medication for blood pressure. You need to make sure that when you go to the physician's office, all of these things are being in place so that you get the most accurate reading. So an empty bladder. So a full bladder, you'll see on that circle, can add 10 millimeters of mercury. That's how we measure it. So up here you can see if your blood pressure is really, 120, and you have a full bladder and you go in to get your blood pressure taken, you could all of a sudden be in the stage 1 hypertension because your systolic blood pressure could be reading 130. So we'll go up, and I know nurses are extremely guilty of this. I'm guilty of it. Don't have a conversation. We put your cuff on and then we start asking you a question as we're pumping it up. But talking or active listening, so what they mean by active listening is, kind of leaning in, nodding your head, doing this, your whole body kind of moves. That can also add another 10 millimeters of mercury. So using the correct cuff size, a cuff too small adds 2 to 10. Putting the cuff on a bare arm. So a cuff over clothing can add anywhere from 5 to 50 millimeters of mercury on the scale. So, when you go to the doctor's office, often it's the first thing you do. and they're like, oh, I can just get it over that. That's thin. So if you are going to the doctor's office, do try to think ahead. And if you know that's the way they do it at that office, maybe wear, a tank top or camisole so you can take your sweater off and say, oh, here's my bare arm, because 50 points on here, it's a huge difference. So supporting the arm at heart level. So an unsupported arm adds 10 millimeters of mercury. So that means the arm with the cuff, you don't want it just drooping down. You want it on a table, or you want the person taking your blood pressure to be supporting your arm. And then if you cross your legs, you can add 2 to 8 millimeters of mercury. So what do you think? When you go to the doctor's office, are all these things happening? So be an advocate for your own health to make sure that you have an accurate reading. Oh, and then I forgot to read supported back and feet. So if you're up on a table and your legs are dangling, you're not getting an accurate reading. You really need to be flat foot, back supported. And they don't even mention it on here, but ideally, you will also have been sitting for at least 5 minutes before you get a reading. So a blood pressure can be a really good indicator of the status of our vessels and what's going on in our bodies, but only if it's done accurately. So in Story County, there are various places you can go to have your blood pressure checked outside of the doctor's office. Do some of you have home blood pressure cuffs? Looks like some. So if you don't, most libraries in Story County have blood pressure cuffs that can be checked out or used in the library to do self-checks. So this is in thanks to our past American Heart Association Heart Corps member. And then another place is my office. So you can all come to Mary Greeley, Story County Public Health during our walk-in hours, and you can have your blood pressure assessed by a nurse. So Mondays and Wednesdays, 8 a.m. to noon, Fridays, 10:30 to 2:30. We are right across from the Mary Greeley Ambulance Bay, 1114 Duff Avenue. It's free. You can come in, and we will make sure that we're doing your blood pressure correctly. So we talked about lots of different habits, and if including some of these habits seems a little overwhelming, handout 12 has some guides to creating healthy daily habits. So there's been more and more research recently about how to create habits that stick. How do you change habits? So one of the ways that's talked about in research is creating a habit loop, which involves 3 parts: a cue, a routine, and a reward. So a cue is a reminder to act on your habit. It jogs your memory. The example they have is just having hand weights on your couch. Before you sit down, you're going to see those hand weights and think, oh, I better do some arm strengthening here. Next is a routine. So choose small, achievable versions of your habit to start with. Make sure that it's something you like so that it's easily repeatable. So again, small changes can build up over time and you're more likely to be successful. So the example they give is to build a walking habit, start with a short 15-minute routine instead of an ambitious hour-long hike. You can also invite a friend to join you. And then the third step is that reward. So positive emotions make habits stick. So have fun while you do it, or your new activity, and associate it with a reward. So the example is, if your new habit is core strengthening, try temptation bundling. So reserve watching your favorite TV show for when you exercise. So the reward is you can watch that trashy TV show, but only if you're doing your core exercises. So that's what they mean by a habit loop. So overall, this is some, I call it wise wisdom from Jessica Murick. So she's a PhD and a registered dietitian, and she summarizes really well, I think, what having a healthy heart and healthy life can be and how it can be managed with the choices that you make every day. So her advice is eating a diet high in fiber, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
And I just want to tell people that one is in your regular handout.
Yes, thank you. So low in excess sodium, sugar, and then low nutrient, ultra processed foods. So being physically active. And again, it's both that aerobic, so making sure your heart rate is increasing a little bit, and then also the strength training. Get adequate, consistent sleep. Maintain our social connections. Don't smoke and reduce substance and alcohol use. Control blood pressure and blood glucose. Get recommended vaccinations to prevent serious infections. So that's my favorite as a public health nurse, of course. And then treat mental health conditions. Participate in evidence-based cancer screenings. Maintain continuous longitudinal primary care. So that means you really want to have a physician who knows you, who has a history of you, and can follow you. So the major pillars of longevity are really already well known. They're evidence-based and frankly, not that mysterious. They work precisely because they are sort of boring, they're repeatable, and they are grounded in decades of data. So this last handout, number 13, is the topics we've talked about today. This one is AHA, American Heart Association, and also the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. But this is a really good summary of everything that we've talked about. And then you can see that you all have your friend Annie on your table. And we are going to talk about some hands-only CPR. So hands-only CPR does save lives. So we're going to watch this video. And then if you'd like to, you can practice your skills. So when CPR is performed immediately, it can double or triple the chance of survival from cardiac arrest. So we'll watch this video, and it's totally up to you how you want to try this. You can do it on the table, or this is a knee pad. If you want to be brave and get down, put your knees on this and put that on the floor.
Today. I don't want to ruin anything I doesn't know.
Life moves pretty fast,
Little
but not
ad.
at Freddy's. When that first bite hits, you can't.
If you see a teen or adult suddenly collapse, it is important to act fast. Helping to save a life is easier than you might think. Just start hands-only CPR. The first step is to ask someone to call 911 and to get an AED, or call 911 yourself and put your phone on speaker mode so the operator can assist you. Then get directly over the victim. Put the heel of one hand in the center of the chest and put your other hand on top of the first. Then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. It's important to push, giving 100 to 120 compressions per minute, which is about the same tempo as the song Staying Alive, or the rate of music you're listening to right now. Let's hope you never have to use hands-only CPR. But know that CPR combined with using an AED provides the best chance of saving a life. If possible, use an AED every time you provide CPR. Again, If you see a teen or adult suddenly collapse, don't be afraid to start hands-only CPR. Remember, call 911 and ask someone to get an AED. Then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until the AED and help arrives. Your actions can help save a life.
So the reason that the American Heart Association is, teaching this hands-only CPR now is they were finding a lot of people did not want to do the breaths. And so the research showed that just the hands-only CPR could still have a really significant impact. And so that's why the hands-only CPR is taught to a lot of groups, because there's no certification. You can just jump in and do hands-only CPR and know that you might be saving a life. So if you want to try it out, and if you all sing Staying Alive, I'll be happy. So feel free. Do they want to do questions first? Yes.
And then I think we'll do that. So I don't know if people online heard that, but we're going to do questions first, and then we'll do the hands-only CPR. People would like help with that. So we have a question right back here.
This isn't really a question, but it's an experience I had in December. I was getting so busy with Christmas and all that stuff was floating through my head, and I had fixed my pill box and in my bedroom, which isn't normal for me. And always every night I put my morning pills in front of my plate for breakfast and stuff. Well, anyway, I was just hustling around and I wasn't paying attention to what time it was or anything. And I thought, and I also had a doctor's appointment that day. And of course, I have genetic severe white coat hypertension, which doesn't help. And then after what you just said about these other things, I'm going, oh, good, that subtracted a little bit more. But anyway, I took my blood pressure several times during the day after I realized, Marion, did you take your pills or did you not take your pills? I don't remember taking them, but if I take some or if I don't take some, I'm going to end up on the floor either way. So I didn't take any because I didn't know what to do because my blood pressure was higher than it normally is before I get ready to go to the doctor. But anyway, I went to the doctor and I told the nurse about what was going on. And so she said, okay, well, then the doctor comes in and I always have to take my own blood pressure unit along. So anyway, I told her what happened. And so she says, okay, now we're going to be real quiet and we're going to do this. She at least holds my arm up. The nurse never does. So anyway, she checks it and she looks at me and she goes, Marion, you did not take your pills. I want you to go straight home. Your blood pressure is 210 over 110. Yeah, the big one right there. And I'm going, oh my God. So anyway, she had me go home, take my blood pressure when I got home, and wanted me to take a pill immediately. And then she wanted me to check it in a half an hour. And if it hadn't gone down a little bit more, take that. And if it goes back up, get your butt to the hospital. Well, anyway, it all went down and my blood pressure went lower after Christmas was over. But that's what stress can really do to you. It was a real lesson for me and scary after hearing those numbers.
Oh, goodness. I'm glad it went down. Yes. I have a question up front here.
Regards to the amount of sleep you get.
Yes.
Say I go to bed at 11:30 and get up at 8. That seems like enough time. But my bladder says 2 or 3 times I'm going to get up during the night. Now what? I mean, I'm not getting quality sleep.
So yes, the bladder question is a very common one. So some people have success with putting themselves on kind of a water intake schedule. So, trying to not drink water past a certain time can sometimes help, not drinking past 9 p.m. if you go to sleep around 11 p.m. You could try experimenting with that. But some of us just have some active bladders and we are going to have to get up during the night to empty our bladders. Are you able to go back to sleep easily? Okay. Yeah. So part of aging, sometimes our bladders do not want to cooperate with us. And so as long as you're able to get back to sleep pretty quickly, that might just be how it's going to be. But I do encourage you, if you notice that you're getting up a lot to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, to experiment with kind of pushing back that last water intake.
Other questions?
I have a question on sodium.
Yeah.
All right, if I'm reading the labels, what is too high for me to buy? I need education on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to this slide. So the labels are going to be based on the recommendations for everyone, which is this 3,400 milligrams. So that's going to be the US daily recommended amount. However, if you have hypertension and your doctor is recommending something called the DASH diet or a hypertension diet, they're only going to want you to consume 1,500 milligrams. So when you're looking at a label and it says that it contains 60% of your daily intake, that's going to be 60% of that 3,400 milligrams. So in general, dietitians recommend that most foods have well under 20% US daily recommended intake per serving. Another guideline is look for things that say low sodium, not lower sodium. So lower sodium is what manufacturers do. They might have a really high sodium version. Lower sodium just means it has lower, but it still might be a really high sodium food. So for it to say low sodium food, it actually has to have a low content, but not lower. But I would talk with your physician more about, what they want your recommended daily amount to be.
Well, they're talking about, Robert Kennedy is talking about highly processed foods.
Yep.
And I'm really confused on that. It sounds like everything, cookies, chips, everything that I normally eat is high processed.
So highly processed can be defined different ways. When I'm talking about highly processed for sodium, so a lot of soups, like soup canned soup is really high sodium. Frozen meals, to retain that flavor after being frozen, they have to add a lot of sodium. So everything is processed somewhat. So like when we get frozen blueberries, they've gone through the process of being washed and dried and frozen. So most things in our food system are processed somewhat. It's what they add into it during that processing that we want to avoid. So we want to avoid added sugar, added sodium. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Is there anything, I have somebody that lives by the rule that if they look at a product and it has like 5 or more ingredients in it, not making a recipe, but if it's a prepackaged 5 or more, that they don't buy it. Or they'll sometimes say too, if you can't pronounce everything that's in it, type of thing.
So yes and no. So, bread, we'll take bread for instance. It's best to buy 100% whole wheat bread. However, there's also a lot of times they're going to add riboflavin, which is a vitamin B. So sometimes vitamins are added, they enrich things, they sound scary, they sound foreign, but it's really just vitamins. So being a label reader is really the best way to kind of navigate that. Yes, less ingredients mean it's like closer to nature, closer to how it came off of the plant or tree. And really, if you're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and those fatty fish, you'll find that you are pretty full So then you have less room for the high sodium processed foods.
When you read the salt labels, also pay attention to proportion.
Yes,
Because it
good
may
point.
say 780 milligram per quarter cup.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, if you salt at home, it's 1 teaspoon, which is 2,800 milligrams per day per person.
Yes, thank you.
Wait, now say that again. If it's your table salt, is that what you were saying? How much is in a teaspoon?
2,800 milligrams. And
Oh,
then
there's
her,
my bowl of popcorn right there.
and her other point was looking at the serving size. So, you know, a can of soup, sometimes they're smaller and you might eat the whole can, but that was actually 2 servings. And if it was a high sodium soup, you've had more than your fair share of sodium probably.
Right.
Talk about salt substitutes.
So those can be tricky. My recommendation is instead of using salt, use herbs and spices. So, you know, you can go spicy, you can go mild, but herbs and spices, you're getting some extra greens with some of them. And then the tricky thing about salt substitutes is if you are on a medication for blood pressure or your heart, sometimes the salt substitutes are made with potassium, which can interfere with the heart medicine. So always talk with your medical provider before you use a salt substitute, because you do need to be careful about the electrolyte that might be in there and how it impacts a medication you might be on.
So is Mrs. Dash okay, or is that a salt substitute? I have no clue. I know a lot of people.
Is Mrs. Dash just herbs and
Well, that's what I thought, but
spices?
I could be wrong.
What is it?
Mostly, I think.
Okay.
But maybe there's potassium. I have no clue.
That's what they give you in the hospital if you.
Okay. Okay.
So it must be herbs and spices.
Is it people who have high blood pressure that need to watch their salt? Or does everyone? Because my brother was taking sodium tablets because he needed more salt. So
Very few people need extra salt. It's typically those that have low blood pressure from some condition. Sometimes it's genetic. So very few people need to add extra salt. Overall, in the United States, we're eating way too much salt. So I encourage everyone to be aware of their salt impact and, you know, the sodium impact that or how much they're taking in. If you have healthy blood pressure, no risk factors for heart disease, things like that, you might be one of the lucky few who really doesn't have to worry about it.
What about onion salt, garlic salt? Why? Are those okay or, I mean, I don't,
Typically, those are like onion or garlic with sodium. So you can just, if it's garlic powder, that's just garlic. But if it's garlic salt, it also has the sodium in it. Oh, he found an answer for Mrs. Dash.
everything.
Onion, garlic, pepper, carrots. Yeah, so Mrs. Dash is all herbs and spices. So go at it.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Any, I wanted to bring up, you talked about like tying your exercise or healthy habit to something else. Who all was here the program the end of January? Dr. Phillips talked about creating habits, and that's she's from Iowa State, and that's what she researches. And she one of the things she teaches is to tie your, like, something I wasn't at that program, unfortunately, but she's done it for me before. Like, like when I go home from work, when I change my clothes, I right away put my walking shoes on and go for a walk. Or when you get up and you take your medicine, then you do, whatever, and you make sure. And so I like that consistent message we're hearing, but it is, I like that. Reward yourself. Like when I
Yes.
do this, I get to.
Yeah. I teach another course and they talk about celebrating yourself, and it sounds really silly and kind of trite even, but the brain research shows that even like, woohoo, way to go, Jane, simple things like that, it spikes some dopamine in your brain and you are much more likely to do whatever you just did again. So look silly. Reward yourself.
I like that.
Cheer for yourself.
I like that. Good job coming to the program today, everybody. Give yourself a round of applause here. Yeah. Good job. Other questions?
It's not really a question, but it's a remark. I had listened to an hour-long lecture from a physician in Hopkins Hospital, and he had interesting observations. But you said here are the ways of taking blood pressure, which he also mentioned, which means the measurements you get at the hospital are basically incorrect. And if you take them only once a year, that's twice as incorrect because you may be stressed or you may have been running up the stairs or whatever it is. So, recommendation, how do you get an accurate blood pressure?
Yeah, so the American Heart Association actually has a huge push right now in medical facilities. It's called Target BP to get practitioners to take blood pressures accurately. But again, until every health practitioner is doing that, you really have to be an advocate for yourself and say, can you please take my blood pressure this way? I have this from that sheet that you have on there is from the American Heart Association. You can say this is backed by research. Can you please take my blood pressure with these guidelines? So it is hard sometimes, to be an advocate like that, but just know that it is worth it because you do want the most accurate reading.
Nope. One sec. Let me get your question on the microphone here.
Some people take your blood pressure on your wrist, and I always find mine to be higher.
When you do it on your wrist?
Yes, and they don't care.
Like at a doctor's office?
Yeah, actually, it's in Urbandale at osteoporosis clinic, and they do it. And I always laugh and say it's Interstate 80 that does it, which is probably true, that it hikes it way up. But you're not an advocate of wrist. No.
Yeah, so again, just being an advocate. If it's meant to be, if it's a wrist cuff, it can be more accurate. In general, it's not as accurate as an over the elbow cuff, but again, it's all dependent on, is it the right fit? Was it placed correctly?
All right. Any other questions before we do the hands-only CPR? People want to try that out. All right. Well, thank you. Oh, no questions online. Nope, I checked that. So for those of you online, you can sign off now. I don't think there'll be anything for you to see here. Those of you here who want to give it a try or have questions, come up. Please stay. If you are not interested in the hands-only CPR, you do not need to stay. You can fill out your evaluation, drop it off in the basket at the back there. I just want to remind you all, our next program is Wednesday, March 11th. It's on Health Insurance 101. And Heather Vandewater, who is our, she used to be called the business office director. Now it's called revenue cycle director, I believe it's her title. Lots of questions. I know people have insurance and how it applies and what about when you're in the hospital and clinic and all that kind of stuff. And then Wednesday, March 25th, we have Dr. Kitchell, who's a retired neurologist, is doing a program on tremor diagnosis and Parkinson's disease. So if you want to come to any of those, please sign up online. And we will get your April through June programs out in early to mid-March. Those will be coming out. Thank you for joining us. Again, please stay if you would like to do the hands-only CPR or you want to come up and ask any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you all.